Some time ago, I received this comment asking me, could I do a video on Toowoomba? I also received this comment asking me to do a video on Clem Jones. Now, Brisbane and Toowoomba have a shared past, and this video has some Clem Jones action towards the end. So, let's get into this horror story, shall we? The first thing that Brisbane and Toowoomba share is why they were settled in the first place. See, the original convict settlement of Moreton Bay was actually Redcliffe. However, it was abandoned in 1825, and one of the major reasons was it didn't have enough water. So, they relocated over here, where the present CBD is. And one of the major reasons they moved here was this creek, which was used as the water supply until the late 1860s. Toowoomba has a similar story. See, in the 1840s, the first place in the Toowoomba area to be settled was actually a place called the Springs, which was later named Drayton. Whilst Drayton wasn't abandoned, more and more people kept on moving down here, to a place known as the Swamps. This later became known as Toowoomba. Like Brisbane, one of the major reasons people moved here was it had water. But unlike Brisbane's water supply, Toowoomba's was described as, get this, abundant, having an abundant water supply. Now that sounds quite nice. How can this be a horror story? Well, as the population started to increase, a disease started killing people, and that illness was typhoid fever. See, this disease causes prolonged fever, headaches, fatigue, loss of appetite, stomach pain, nausea, diarrhea, rashes, delirium, encephalitis, and quite often back then, death. But what makes this disease so repugnant is not how you die from it, but how you get it. See, you don't get typhoid by some dirty bugger sneezing on you. No, it's so much worse than that. So you get typhoid from consuming food and drink contaminated with raw sewage. Now, according to Margaret Hampton, Brisbane and Toowoomba were likened to the grossest sanitary situation of any old English town. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of sanitary situations in old English towns, I think of people throwing the contents of their chamber pots out the window and people running for cover to get out of the way of such a foul missile. So how the blazes did people end up eating and drinking it? Seriously, what the hell? Well, the answer is fivefold. See, the first major problem was that people didn't actually understand how diseases worked. The most common belief at the time was that bad air or things that stunk, known as miasma, were the causative factor of disease. This leads us to our second problem, and that is that people would dispose of their human waste in inappropriate ways, such as improper burying techniques or letting it enter into creeks and rivers to get the awful miasmic stink away from them and their families. Now, it seems like common sense to us now, don't poo where you drink, but yeah, because people didn't know about germs, that's what they did. The third issue was that people could be carriers of this disease and not even know it. The fourth was this was a time when most people didn't wash their hands because they didn't know about bacteria. Fifth and finally, when Queensland separated from New South Wales, it was stony broke, so health and drainage weren't actually priorities. So as Toowoomba grew and grew, more and more people disposed of their rubbish and sewerage both into Gowrie Creek and the wetlands. And as Brisbane grew and grew, more and more people did the same with Wheat Creek that flowed through the city, and it too became super polluted. Surprisingly to no one, in the 1860s, the swamps around Toowoomba became super polluted with raw sewage, and they started to really stink. Now remember how I said that they believed that bad smells cause disease? In 1864, the then mayor of Toowoomba, William Groom, was like, "Mark my words, those smells from the swamp will cause illness amongst our townsfolk." In 1865, a number of people in Toowoomba started to get sick and die, and Groom was like, "See, what did I tell you with those blasted smelly swamps? We should drain them." Now, amazingly, he calls them cesspools, and a cesspool is a place for sewage, so he knew what was in them. I find it insane not to say, stop flushing your sewage into other people's drinking water, but no, it was drain the swamps. Now, he tried every trick in the book to get them drained, including appealing to people's greed, like, "Imagine how fertile that bogwater land would be if we drained the swamps." In 1866, another outbreak happened outside the town among the people who were building this railway. And it happened for the same reasons, and that was that sewerage was unfortunately getting in the drinking water. Sadly, the records of this time have been lost, but from what we do know, 50 to 60 people were being admitted to hospital every single week. So yeah, Toowoomba's little hospital was absolutely overwhelmed. Now, one of the visiting doctors from Brisbane actually advocated for drains and fresh water in the camps. But sadly, the government ignored his advice and still held on to the idea that miasma was responsible. I suspect that this might have been one of the factors that led the government to giving Groom his funds for draining the swamp in 1872. In 1876, Groom had them drained, and wouldn't you know it, the typhoid epidemic was about to get so much worse. Here's a question. Who do you reckon are the most vulnerable when it comes to drinking polluted water? That's right. It's children. Back in Brisbane, the child mortality rate was absolutely through the roof. Here's an article from the Brisbane Courier dated from the 26th of July 1875 talking about the child mortality rate in Brisbane. Here the writer says how he had lost 3 of his 7 children. He then goes on to talk about how his neighbours have buried 6 of their 8 children. Alarmingly, these weren't isolated cases. No. See, according to Enid Barclay of the University of Queensland, in the 1870s, the infant mortality rate was 245 per 1,000 births dying before they were 1. She goes on to further say that it was 3 times higher than anywhere else in regional Queensland. For comparison, as of 2022, according to the Chief Health Officer of Queensland, the infant mortality rate was 4.6 per 1,000 births for our state. So yeah, 245 per 1,000 for just one city is indeed shockingly high. If we look at that paper again, we can see the people of Brisbane beg for a sewer to be put in to save the little ones. Whilst the council couldn't afford a sewer to ferry the waste away, they came up with the best thing they could. And that was the earth closet, better known as the dunny. Not the long drop variety that you do your business and wait several seconds to hear it go plop in the deep below you. Nope, this charming setup had a tin which you'd go to the toilet in, and then you'd overthrow ash or sawdust or dry earth on top to mask the smell. And a couple of times a week, some truly unfortunate person called a night soilman would come and get it. But let's get back to Toowoomba and see what horrors had unfolded there. From 1877 to 1878, Toowoomba and the railway camps of the Dalby line got absolutely smashed by another epidemic of typhoid. Apparently, the Toowoomba hospital only had like 35 beds, so many of the sick were forced to sleep on the ground. So Groom was like, the government should look after the navvies, it's not Toowoomba's job. Whilst Groom wasn't successful in shifting the navvies from his hospital, this actually put a bit of fear in the government. Because think about it, if all the workers keep on getting sick and dying, then the railway doesn't get built. And without a railway, then produce doesn't make it to ports, and if you can't make it to ports, then they can't sell the stuff, and then the state stays broke. So yeah, hurts everyone. So the government starts to listen to Groom again. Another problem now for Toowoomba is, well, drought. Yep, good thing they got rid of their pesky swamp. We wouldn't want any of that abundant water now, would we? So the Toowoombians were using wells to access their water. But there's now a new problem, and that is that the groundwater is now lower than the long drop toilets that they are using, so the sewerage is now leaching into the groundwater. So guess what happens? That's right, typhoid, baby. So Groom called for an inquiry, which happened in May 1878, and the results were absolutely damning. He finds that most of the wells near houses are only a few metres away from their cesspits. He also finds that most have not emptied their cesspits in years. He even finds that the night soilman has been dumping all the earth closets that the town had in Queen's Park for 6 years. To make matters worse, all the doctors were fighting amongst themselves and trying to one-up one another. One doctor says he's only had 40 cases and 7 deaths. Another says he's only had 18 cases and 9 deaths. One even denies that there was even an epidemic at all. He goes on to brag that he's only had 11 cases and none of his patients have died. The hospital dispenser even gets in on the action and he says, look, we've had 41 cases, we've had 3 people die, but he also states that the hospital has had to turn people away because they are so overwhelmed. But something to think about here is how many people would have gone and seen a doctor when everyone was broke. So people probably wouldn't have gone unless they absolutely had to. Also, if this was the transport, imagine how long it would take to get to the next hospital. In 1877, 21% of the deaths that happened in Toowoomba were because of typhoid. However, by 1878, this number had jumped to 37%. Now let's get over to Brisbane and see what was happening over there. Last we spoke of them, they'd started using this charming little setup. But here's a fun question. With an ever-increasing population and more bums on seats, where is the night soilman to dump his foul cargo? The Brisbane Municipal Council set up its manure depots, as they were called, often on the banks of creeks. Because what could possibly go wrong with that? There was one on Ithaca Creek somewhere that was receiving 25 tonnes a night. The one on Enoggera and Ithaca Creek were put there because they were considered rural. Now sure, Enoggera Dam had been built, but there were still many drinking from creeks and gullies because Enoggera's waters didn't reach them. And sadly, some of these depots were on those creeks. The people who lived near Boodroodabin Manure Depot complained so bitterly. They said, look, the miasmas from this place are giving people typhoid. They even approached the Premier of Queensland, Sir Thomas McElraith, and begged, can you please get rid of this manure depot? So the Premier actually went and inspected the manure depot. And he was like, no, I don't see anything wrong with this. I can't see what those Brisbaneites are even complaining about. So it continued to be a problem and people continued to drink toilet water, essentially. It was so bad and prevalent that the hospitals couldn't afford to treat all the people who were presenting. So like Toowoomba, they were actually being forced to turn a lot of people away. They were also forced to build an additional fever hospital at Bowen Bridge Road from 1875 to 1876. Annoyingly, I could not find any records from this time. However, I do have the records from the Brisbane Hospital from the 1880s to the 1890s, and they are as follows. 1884, 750 cases and 91 deaths. It's really annoying that those early years are so many are unlisted because it'd be really interesting to know how many admissions of typhoid there actually were. 86 and 89, also really big years. Going back to our problem with sewerage, in the end what took out the manure depots was actually an act of God that happened in 1887. Unfortunately for Brisbane, it was a flood of unspeakable filth. This tidal wave of turd absolutely totaled some bloke's house, and all his stuff was totally ruined. So he took the Brisbane Council to court, and he won. So once again, the council had a problem, because what do you do with all this poo? You can't put it on a creek bank, because you have the most disgusting floods, and you're liable to getting sued. You can run into problems burying it, and you believe in miasmas, so you can't just dump it anywhere. So what do you do with it? Some called for it to be put into sealed tubs and put into an incinerator, which South Brisbane actually did for a while. Surprisingly to no one, the smell was absolutely appalling, and people were worried about miasmas. So once again, what do you do with it? Their answer was to send it by ship to the one place they sent everything else they didn't want, and that was St Helena. But in order to get it there, you needed a ship and a wharf to load it on. Unfortunately for Brisbane, Queen's Wharf is what they chose. So yeah, right smack bang in the middle of the city. And a lot of the time these night soil jars leaked. They were uncovered, and sometimes the night soil man missed the boat, and they just sat on the wharf, stinking to high heaven. Apparently the people of our area had never seen so many flies, and this led to a fear that there would be more typhoid cases. There was also a fear that typhoid would spread among the prisoners of St Helena. Also, the smell was so bad that people of Dunwich could smell it. But change was starting to happen. See, it was around the late 1880s to 1890s that germ theory was starting to be accepted in Queensland. But getting back to our sewerage dilemma, the council agreed to pay the princely sum of £17,500 per year for a company to dump most of the sewage here. Paying such a ridiculous amount gets the ball rolling on finally putting in a sewer, because it actually might be cheaper. In 1909, Brisbane set up the Metropolitan Water and Sewerage Board, and they started to plan where the sewage would actually go. Long story shortened substantially, they were about to face disaster after disaster. Their estimate in 1911 on how much this would cost was £400,000 because they should be able to get pretty cheap labour. The plan was to build a sewer that ran in this direction and that got deeper the closer it got to Luggage Point. And then when it got there, it would be pumped into a fandangled sewage treatment plant. Their timing couldn't have been worse. See, they start digging this thing in March 1914. Yep, World War I kicked off a few months later. Yep, turns out most blokes would rather go and work in trenches overseas than in Brisbane. This creates massive labour shortages that shoot the cost of building anything through the roof. Here's an invoice from some of that work done in 1915, and look at the prices as they go up. By the end of the war, they had spent £8.5 million, so much so that there was a royal commission into it in 1920. Their problems don't stop there. See, they make this fancy water treatment plant in 1923. But most are still using dunnies. What's the point of a sewage treatment plant if no one's hooked up to it? In 1929, the Great Depression hits, and then they can't even afford to run the treatment plant, so it doesn't get used. So Brisbane starts bunging all its night soil, sawdust and ashes and whatever else they chucked on top to cancel the smell down the sewer at Milton. And then it pumps all that raw sewage out at Luggage Point. I know, right? What could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out lots. See, all that sawdust keeps on washing onto the islands of Moreton Bay, and it leaves the locals very, very angry. Also, all the stuff that's being put down there changes the acidity inside the pipes, and they're worried about collapse. But worst of all, people are eating the oysters where all the sewage washes out into Moreton Bay. The powers that be were like, "Are you insane? Do you realise how much danger you're in?" They're like, "Don't eat the poo oysters and the shitfish." But do the locals listen? No, they do not. They even arrest a bloke who was like, "Times are hard, I was going to sell them to a hotel for £1." Guess what happens? In 1934, there's another outbreak of typhoid. Nothing quite like the aphrodisiac of sweet, sweet typhoid. Yeah! In 1940, the sewerage main in Pinkenba collapsed, just like all the engineers worried about. The powers at the time were then forced to pump all the raw sewage out at Eagle Farm somewhere and into the river, where it polluted the river and the surrounds until they fixed it in 1942. According to local heritage places, at the time we see that people who went to the school at Pinkenba started to get sick with some unnamed gastro complaint. It doesn't say it was typhoid, but it's still a sewerage nightmare situation if you ask me. From here I can find no more instances of people getting typhoid in our area. And I have a theory on why that is. See, around this time a wonder drug became available, and that wonder drug was antibiotics, which you treat typhoid with. Now, up until the late 1950s, the council had tried in vain to sewer the city, but they really didn't get far. In 1961, night soil personnel still serviced 80% of the city. But luckily, in 1961, we got the man, the legend himself, the hero of the toilet flushing world, and that was Clem Jones. See, Big Clem Jones approached property developers with deals to get sewers installed. He went on radio stations on a weekly basis, selling the idea that Brisbane could indeed be sewered and how beneficial it would be. He went on the news and sold the idea there too. He also approached the government and got the loans to further this project. From 1963 to 1967, Brisbane went from only 40% having a flushing loo to nearly 60% being able to experience the luxury of doing a dump and flushing it away. By 1973, less than 5,000 homes were still using night soil services. But in this time, the then Prime Minister of Australia, Gough Whitlam, was quite impressed by what Clem had achieved. Whitlam was like, oh my, there's like 45% of Australia that's still unsewered. We can't have this. So the Whitlam government starts a 60% subsidy on sewerage reticulation all over Australia. His government also says to our man Clem, hey, I think it's high time you start treating your sewerage. Want a treatment plant? Yep, because according to local heritage places, prior to 1973, Brisbane was pumping its effluent, diluted but virtually untreated, out into Moreton Bay. 1973, guys, that's actually not that long ago. That's insane. But our story doesn't end there. No, by some twist of fate, our story actually turns on its head. See, back in the year 2006, during the Millennium Drought, there was this city who got so short on water, the mayor said, let's recycle our own sewage and pump it back into the drinking water. And that city was Toowoomba. This clip comes from 60 Minutes, where they were interviewing Peter Beattie, who was the Premier of Queensland at the time.
Armageddon, that's the phrase you've used for recycling sewage. You say in Brisbane, to do that would be Armageddon.
Yeah.
Why is it not okay in Brisbane, okay in Toowoomba?
No, well, what's happening is very simple. We support the Mayor of Toowoomba, Di Thorley. We've put $23 million towards this project.
This is the biggest city of the state. Why did you do it here?
Well, because you've got to actually progressively work your way through this.
Premier, what would happen if tonight on 60 Minutes you said, sorry Brisbane, you've got to cop it, we're about to...
I'd probably get shot politically. That's what would happen.
So Toowoomba went from having a mayor who had an abundant water supply trying to save his town from the horrors of drinking toilet water to having a mayor who had no water trying to save her town with the wonders of toilet water. And Brisbane went from having a premier who couldn't give a damn that Brisbaneites were drinking toilet water to a premier saying, no, Brisbane isn't drinking toilet water because, according to 60 Minutes, he'd be shot politically. In the end, Toowoomba said no, but I just find it amazing how things can go so full circle like that. Anyway, if you like unusual stories about our history, like this one, I have many others like it on this channel. Also, if you've learnt anything new, please like, subscribe and share. Cheers! Thanks.